Please welcome Accenture's Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, Paul Doherty.
Good morning. It's really fantastic to be with you here today. And I'm sensitive to the fact we've all been sitting for a while, so if you promise to behave and keep it short, why don't you all stand up for just a quick second, stretch, take a deep breath. Okay? Okay, I said behave. Now, okay. We have to sit down and keep going with the program, though. Jump. You can jump a little bit. Okay. Why don't we sit back down? And it really has been a fantastic morning. I don't know about you all, but okay, we got to sit down. That side of the room was great. Thank you over there. This side of the room we're still working on. Okay. Okay, thanks for that. Hopefully that was helpful to get the energy flowing in the room again. Okay, if you can quiet down on that side of the room, please. Please? Okay, fantastic. So it's really been an inspiring morning for me so far. You can't come to an event like this and not be inspired with the great thoughts that we've heard. And I was thinking about what can I add to the great perspectives and great leaders that you've already heard from. And I decided what I'd talk about a little bit is innovation and inclusion, and specifically about inclusive innovation, and just try to bring to life a little bit why I think that's such a priority for us in everything we do today and in the world we're creating. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But let me start by asking you a question. How many of you think that a computer has a gender, or does a computer have a gender? Since we're here, International Women's Day. Yes, okay. So the answer to the question, today you might have some yeses and some nos. If you were asking that question 70 years ago, the answer would have been almost certainly yes. Computers are women, because computers were the rooms of women and the women who were involved in computing in that era. Projectiles. If you watched the movie Hidden Figures, great movie. You'll find I'm a tech geek as well as a history geek. Dorothy Vaughan, Hidden Figures, was the woman she was a computer. She was doing computations for NASA. She also became the first programmer for NASA, if you followed the history of that movie. Kay McNulty was was a computer who became the first programmer and programmed the ENIAC, which was the first electronic computer about 70 years ago. And in that era, computers were women. And computers then became the first programmers. And you all know that famous history with Grace Hopper, memorialized now in the Grace Hopper events and such. Grace Hopper, Admiral Hopper, created the first high-level programming language of COBOL. So we've had inspirational women driving innovation in technology for many years. And I think one of the important things we need to do at International Women's Day and these types of events is celebrate those role models and celebrate the role that women have played in innovation. My intersection with that, with those kind of role models happened about 4 years into my career back in 1990. It was a time I was working for the same company with Accenture back then. And frankly, I was about to leave Accenture probably. I was getting a little bored with what I was doing. And I met an amazing woman named Adele Goldberg. Anybody know Adele Goldberg? So it's kind of sad that people don't know Adele Goldberg. Adele Goldberg, along with Alan Kay, invented the most beautiful programming language ever created, in my opinion, called Smalltalk at Xerox PARC. Was involved in the creation of the Alta. He even knows. It involved in the creation of the Alto. She was the one that demoed all that to Steve Jobs, who famously popularized it in the Mac and the Lisa, and that all took off as a new way of computing. Adele Goldberg founded a company, was a CEO in 1990 of a company called Park Place Smalltalk, which was popularizing this wonderful programming language. And I met her, and I became super inspired that this COBOL stuff I was doing maybe wasn't the future. Maybe the Smalltalk stuff was going to be fun to do. And I was amazingly inspired by Adele Goldberg, by what she did to popularize and commercialize Smalltalk, which led to object-oriented computing. That was why we created the programming language Java, now the most common programming language. And everything we do today is object-oriented because of the work that Adele Goldberg did as a pioneer in technology, and one of the women we should be celebrating. So that's how it intersected my career. And Adele Goldberg was instrumental in my career. Then there's many other women that we all should know much more about. There's a woman named Claire Evans who just wrote a book. She's a musician and journalist. She just wrote a book that came out this week that you should go buy on Amazon. It's called Broadband, with a space, not broadband, the word, broadband. She's talking about the band of broads that created the internet, in her words. And And literally, there's stories that just haven't been told about the women pioneers that created the internet. We tend to hear of the Vint Cerfs and many other, Tim Berners-Lee, and a lot of great pioneers of the internet that we celebrate. We should be celebrating the women as well, and Claire Evans' book is doing that. So that's great. We have a lot of pioneers and women innovators that we should be celebrating. But my point today, as you think about inclusive innovation, is that's not enough. We can't just have handfuls of women or women here and there that we celebrate. We need equal representation and inclusivity and equality in the way that we think about innovation, in the way that we drive technology going forward. And let me just explain why I think that's such a priority, for all of us. The reason, if you step back and look at the era we're living in right now, we live in an amazing time. And it's kind of like the frog in a pot. If you heard the frog in the pot analogy, you turn up the water and the frog doesn't realize it's getting hotter and eventually the frog dies. That's kind of I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to us. That's not I'm an optimist. That wasn't the right analogy to use. But the metaphor is right. We're living through such amazing times, we tend to take for granted the amazing things that are happening. I mean, think about the things that are in front of us on a day-to-day basis. Cloud computing, mobility, Internet of Things, virtual reality, mixed reality, distributed ledgers, quantum computing, CRISPR, biotech, genomics, 3D printing. It could go on. And that's creating an amazing array of possibilities in how we reshape and we reimagine the world. And that's kind of what what lies ahead of us. But the biggest thing that's happening that we're doing a lot of work in right now, and many of you are as well, the biggest thing, and I call it the alpha trend, is artificial intelligence. It's the trend that's shaping all the other trends. And artificial intelligence, there's a lot of definitions of it. I think of it as it's just really the set of technologies that's approximating things we tend to think of as human capability. That's what artificial intelligence is. And so it's artificial intelligence or technologies that can sense, they can see and hear and things like that. They can think and make decisions, and it can interact with us and communicate with us. So sensing, thinking, and interacting is what artificial intelligence does. And in the age of artificial intelligence, it's really a new era of thinking about what the impact of technology is on what we all do and the way we work and live. And that's why the way we think about innovation and technologists and inclusion really needs to change, because we're entering this human plus machine age where technology is shaping our human experience. And I'd ask you to remember that phrase. I see a couple people writing, yes, write that down. Technology is shaping the core in the heart of our human experience. And that's really what's happening today. And that may sound kind of trite and just like a phrase, but it really is a fundamental pivot point, in my view, of the age we're in. And that we'll look back at and realize that something fundamentally different is happening going forward from where we are today. This idea that technology is not just the phone in your pocket or the screen, the laptop, or the TV, or the device you use. Technology is at the heart of everything we do. Let me ask you a question just to see if your personal experience agrees with this. I see some of you typing on phones, which is okay, and most of you are looking, which is good. But how many of you check your phone before you get out of bed in the morning? Come on, I'll give you time for the rest of you to raise your hands. 65% of you, statistically speaking, check your phone before your feet hit the floor. The average person in this room touches your phone 2,617 times a day. 2,617. Now back to the survey. Raise your hands. How many of you sleep with your phone in your hand because you're afraid of missing something? Seriously, you're the only honest one in the room, I think. The 3% of you sleep with your phone in your hand on a habitual basis because you're afraid of missing something. So that's the age we live in, and that's what I mean by it's the human experience, and that's just this phone, a few ounces of metal, silicon, and glass, and that's the experience we have with it. As you think about where technology is, and this has only been around 10 years. This was 10 years old, the smartphone, and we depend on it to that degree. Think about what's happening in the next 10 years now. You have Alexa in your living room, or Google Home, or Bixby, or whatever you use. We have virtual reality, vision, voice, natural communication brought on by the age of AI and these technologies. It's fundamentally transforming the human experience in the way that we interact with technology and allowing us to create a new set of experiences. And think about what companies are doing with that already today. Think about Amazon as an example. Any of you use Amazon's Key service yet? The new service that they're pushing out. Amazon acquired Ring to let you in their house. They're developing a service called Key, which means you can let Amazon into your house when you're not even there. So think about that. You're letting a company into your house when you're not there. Think about the level of trust and the experience that you're sharing with them. In that case, that you're giving them access to. Think about NeuroPace, which is a very exciting startup that's developed a technology that's an implant powered by machine learning for epileptic people with epilepsy that can learn the patterns and brain signals that cause your epilepsy and intervene with a signal to try to minimize your seizures. And they've already shown that with to date, they've been able to reduce seizures by about 40%. As it learns, they believe they'll be able to get that to 70+% reducing seizures. That's changing experience and changing lives based on technology. And that's really what we're, what we're moving into with these new experiences. And that's why, this new human plus machine age, where all this comes together in this age of artificial intelligence, we need to think differently about how we create these experiences. And that's why inclusion becomes important. Because we're not just designing technology to put a little button on a phone for somebody to order a product, or creating an e-commerce website, or or changing the manufacturing line by doing industrial automation. We're fundamentally changing all the experiences that we have as we work and live. And in that kind of world, if that technology is the foundation of the world we're creating, so the output is the world we're creating, the input better be an inclusive and diverse workforce, shaping, designing, managing those experiences, or I can guarantee you the world that results won't be the world we want it to be. And that's why an inclusive innovation approach isn't optional. It's essential if we want to create the world of great possibilities that's ahead of us in the future and avoid some of the issues that we have ahead. So that's critically important. The other point that's important about in the inclusive innovation is the way the teams come together to create it. Again, think about the output we want, which is a world that has these characteristics, these different characteristics. There's a survey that Harvard did recently, and this gets to trust. We talked about trust a little bit. In the era we're moving into, where you're going to trust a company to implant a device, to enter your home, and these types of experiences, you're going to need to trust that company. Are you going to trust a company that's different than you? Are your consumers going to trust a company that's different than you in an era where consumers are reading the labels of the corporation itself? They want to see what's inside the company, how the company behaves. Is the company like them? And in that area, you better be inclusive if you want to be differentiated for your customers, if you want to grow your business. So it's a business priority to gain that level of trust and get to that kind of inclusive innovation. There's a study that Harvard did recently, and they said they studied teams working on innovation. And the conclusion they came away with is that teams that had at least one person on the team developing a product that matched the ethnographic and socioeconomic background of the consumer base they were targeting was 152% more likely to get it right than if they lacked that diversity. 152% difference in success rate just by representation on the input side and having the right team involved that understood and represented the demographics of the consumer base and customer base they're trying to get the product to. And that's why inclusive innovation is important. So we think about the human plus machine age. We're doing a lot in this at Accenture. We've written a book on this that's coming out. And there's 4 points that I'd ask you to keep in mind as you think about what's important in innovating in this human plus machine future. The first that we believe is really very important is thinking differently and stepping back and really reimagining what that future looks like. It's not just about changing a little thing here or doing a little machine learning algorithm over there. It's about rethinking what those experiences and what you can do and what your business needs to do, what adjacent industries you may be moving into as you think about those experiences differently. So it's reimagining, and I think a great example of this is work that a lot of the industrial companies are doing. The companies like GE and Siemens and Schneider and companies like that, as they think about manufacturing, and rather than maintaining equipment using technicians and checklists and clipboards or even iPads with clipboards on them, as they do today, they're creating artificial intelligence-enabled virtual doubles powered by real-time information so that the job of the technician is now personalized and dynamic and more rewarding and more interesting, and the process is more efficient and more cost-effective, and the outcome is higher availability and higher capital efficiency. So win-win-win by reimagining and thinking about that process and that business differently. So the first step or first point is really think about reimagining what you do, and that's where we need inclusion and creativity and the right backgrounds to do that. The second point is think about the missing middle. And by missing middle, I mean, this is an area we're doing a lot of work in to understand what are the new jobs that are created when humans and machines work together. Because we spend all of our time, the popular media and press spends all their time talking about machines and people and where the machine comes in and takes over the person's job. And we don't think that's the future. We think the future is one of not artificial intelligence, but collaborative intelligence, where it's the machine's smarts combined with the human smarts to create collaborative intelligence and power these new jobs in the missing middle. And we've outlined a whole set of jobs that we believe are created, which are the new jobs of the future. And as you think about your role, your future, your career, what you want to do, or your children, or your people on your team, or your company, or the human capital in your organization, we think it's important to think about and understand these new jobs and make sure we're these new roles and make sure we're training people for these new roles. There are things, just to give you one example, there are things like personality trainers for the virtual agents we create. Do you want to always have Alexa be the one you talk to? Not to pick on Alexa, I love Alexa, but do you want that to be the personality you always interact with? Or do you want a more personalized persona? Or if you're a bank, do you want a different persona than a gaming company may have? We have to think about all these things. And we're hiring people at Accenture right now with very different backgrounds, not technologists, that can do personality training and behavioral training for artificial intelligence and virtual agents. That's the kind of thinking we need to apply going forward. So reimagination, the missing middle. The third point is responsible AI. And that's a big thing that the people in this room are going to need to have a big impact on. Responsible AI is in responsible use of technology is making sure we don't have the unforeseen consequences and that it has the right impact on people. We don't introduce bias, dishonesty. We deal with the explainability issues and deploy AI in ways that enhance what we do as humans, and we do the things that we want to or have the impacts that we want to have happen. So just as an example why this is important, there was a study that came out a few weeks ago that was a comparison of the facial recognition algorithms of the leading platforms. I won't name them, but it was the facial recognition APIs of the leading platforms. For Caucasian white men, the facial recognition algorithms were 99+% effective, 99+. For black women, less than 65%. The only reason for that is not the algorithm, it's not technology. The technology is not biased. The team that developed that didn't train it with the right data to be demographically representative and have equal results across the workforce. And think about the impact that could have if that software is using in interviewing processes or all sorts of processes, the cascading impact that has on increasing bias and spreading bias rather than reducing it. And I think we have an obligation to make sure we're using technology to reduce bias, discrimination, and access or lack of access and those types of things. So responsible AI has a lot for all of us in the room to work on. So reimagination, missing middle, responsible AI. And the final thing is skills and thinking about how we build skills for the next generation and the current generation, how we move the skills of our current workforce forward to make sure they're viable as all this changes. And there's a lot of exciting work happening there that we're doing in Accenture and applying to our own workforce. A lot of other companies are doing great things. A lot of organizations have new approaches they're taking. But that is the challenge of the era we're moving into. In our view, we don't have a shortage of jobs brought on by all the technology and automation and AI. The machines aren't putting the humans out of work. There's a lot of data points to cite that, like the fact that in the US we have 6 million unemployed people and we have 6 million open jobs. We just don't have the people, don't have the right skills for the job. So how do we use technology and get creative on new learning mechanisms to make sure the people are ready for the jobs? And that's what we're what we mean by the skills element of it. And I love some of the discussion on the last panel because it's not just the STEM skills. And we talk now about STEAM, which is great. We threw the little A into STEM. Now we have this little A for arts and STEAM. I don't think that's enough. I think we really need to think about the role that the humanities and liberal arts and other professions play in this future world. And I haven't come up with the acronym, but something like HumSTEAM or something like that. Doesn't work. Somebody else can help me with that. Which is humanities and STEM or STEAM, and humanities taking a primary role, because these challenges that I just talked about aren't technology challenges. The programmers aren't going to solve these things. It's going to be others in the way we re-engineer, reimagine our organizations with new roles to define, define and get these things right. And we need to make sure that not only are we putting the A into STEM people and people pursuing STEM, but we're putting little STEM into humanities people and getting them ready for the new roles that we need in this future workforce. So I'm out of time now, but hopefully that gives you a view of why in the future it's all about inclusive innovation. And that if we want to create, I'm an optimist. I think we have an amazing future ahead if you look at health outcomes, if you look at the opportunity to increase access and equality, if you look at quality of life, if you look at almost any dimension, if you look at sustainability of the planet, better use of the scarce resources in the world, huge potential for technology to be applied in the right way. And it's up to us to do it right and apply it right. And we're not going to get that right, I don't believe, unless we really focus on getting to equal inclusion, inclusive innovation, and equality as the path to this human plus machine future. So thank you for listening. Hopefully that helps.